The Washington Commanders are a National Football League team that used to be called the Washington Redskins. There was a time when people viewed the Washington Redskins and the Cleveland Indians as names that were not appropriate and therefore should be changed. There was a time, Yale University led much of this, where they did an entire study of when names should be changed and when they shouldn't, who you are hurting, who you're not hurting, what should be the process. And believe me, Yale came up with a book of an unbelievable process to have when you are thinking of a name change. When Daniel Snyder changed the name from the Washington Redskins to the Washington Commanders, there was nary that type of process. It was more like he was on his tuchus, about to be forced to sell, and said, all right, I'll change the name. No problem. The Cleveland Indians became the Cleveland Guardians when it became clear that any sort of financing, any sort of love, attention, baseball wanted no negativity at all. Let's not create any issues that don't already exist, and we'll just have the name changed. There's a ton of other names out there that you would say those could be a little suspect, and they remain. It's sort of like some people in the Hall of Fame did steroids. Some people can't get in the Hall of Fame because of steroids. Who understands the consistency? But then the world changed in the last year. In comes President Trump. I bring your attention to the meeting between President Donald Trump and Commissioner Rob Manfred. Do you remember that big meeting that happened? Do you remember when Donald Trump said, I'm pretty busy doing a lot of stuff, but I want to make sure people know my view of Pete Rose? And then, bing, bang, boom, one meeting later, we've got an accelerated plan to bring Pete Rose off the permanently ineligible list. Well, just Sunday, President Trump was speaking to reporters, and he decided now would be a good time to say the following. Apropos of what you'd think was nothing until you realize it's apropos of everything, because Josh Harris owns the Washington Commanders. Josh Harris is looking for money from D.C. to build a new stadium. Remember, the mayor took the money out of the budget. It's going to be a side hustle at best, and the deal is very much in question. In order for the Commanders to get the new stadium they want, it is entirely possible, if not likely, they're going to have to go to the federal government and say, this is the capital of our esteemed nation. We need a football team here, not in Virginia, not in Maryland. We need it right here in the District of Columbia. And the federal government would look and say, is that appropriated? Do we have a space in the budget for that? And if we do that, I'd like you to forget DEI and everything else and change your name back to the Washington Redskins. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Until you hear what was said. He spoke to reporters and said, you want me to make a controversial statement? This is him saying directly to Sarah Fortinsky of thehill.com. I wouldn't have changed the name. It just doesn't have the same ring to me. Here's what he means. What he means is that I may be asked to give money for a new ballpark, and if I do, I'm probably going to want the name turned back because I got a whole base of people who don't want any of this correctness stuff. They don't want any of this DEI protection of anybody stuff. We're going to rewrite the books. We're going to take away certain things in certain books. Why? Because we can. And history is history, but history can be changed. Not that I've ever heard of, but it can. And guess what? Donald Trump would not be unique as a politician. This is a Tuesday in negotiating for public financing. When we were asked, you got to change your name from Florida to Miami. Okay, no problem. Well, we didn't say that at first. We negotiated a bunch of stuff, claiming we didn't want to do it, and then changed our minds, and then did it because we wanted to do it to start with, but we wanted to pretend that we didn't want to do it in order to make it seem like we were giving something in order to change the name. You got that? Do you think Josh Harris, there's a whole bunch of people that are just fine with the Washington Redskins name? Do you think that Josh Harris came out and said, no, I don't really see that changing. I see us staying with the Commanders? Well, I'll tell you. When Josh Harris says the old name won't be returning, I believe what he's really saying is, yeah, I'd have to consider it if I was asked to do it by somebody who held the keys to the castle that I'm trying to build. And if the federal government intervenes, if the DC council fails to approve and the budget, it doesn't happen, and the mayor doesn't get her wish in DC of putting $1.1 billion into this new facility, if all of that happens, then you're going to be right back at the doors of the federal government. And Trump addressed it. He said the federal government ultimately controls it. And he's talking about the RFK site where this new stadium is going to be, supposedly. Donald Trump said, I saw the plans. I saw the stadium. The owner's a very, very successful and a very good man. Side note, when a politician on any side of the aisle says that, oh, you're a good guy, what it means is you've donated to the campaign. It doesn't mean that they want to have dinner. It doesn't mean that they want to have a social life with you. It doesn't mean they even like you. It means you've donated to the campaign. In return, you get to rub elbows with power and be told that you're a very, very good guy. Trump continued to say, I know him a little bit. It'd be great for the NFL to be there. I can tell you that. So if they want to negotiate a little bit tough, that's okay with me. It's so good. Anyone, raise your hand if you're sure you know where this is going. Raise your hand if you know that the DC Council is going to have a hard time approving $1.1 billion in a budget that couldn't balance if they were the flying Wallendas. Then think about the federal government that may or may not have just put in the big, beautiful bill, a bit of a slusher. You got to love a slush fund. Every budget has one. Every company, when you do the budget for your company, believe me, you've got a slush fund too. We used to call it the owner's prerogative fund. The owner's prerogative fund was used when we knew our owner was going to sign a player or do something or release a player that was still owed money or want something like, please bring in 1 million Twinkies to be eaten by Joey Chestnut. Okay, we don't have the budget for that. Now we do. It's in the owner's prerogative budget. Every company has it. The federal government has it too. It's called the PP, presidential prerogative. Of course, it's got to be approved by the Senate and the House, which it was. And there it is. There's an allocation of money that could go to a stadium in the DC district. Will it?